Alright guys, so welcome to my review today, which is Kathryn Freeman's The Beach Read Book Club. I can never say that right. The Beach Reads Book Club. You will notice I have a pint of ice cream because it's been one of those days. One of those days. Started out well. And then things happened. And why do things have to happen? I'm going to try to get through this, but it also reminds me, I need to put the ice cream down is what I need to do. Because I also have my Coke back there, which is my second Coke of the day, which I'm trying to not do, because what I've realized is nothing destroys a diet faster than a bad day. I found this book because I got kicked out of my book club because my opinions were unwelcome. I had posted about it on social media, and one of my social media friends was like, I've got a book for you, because the Beach Reads Book Club is about a young woman who gets kicked out of her book club. We ended up buddy reading it, which I had no clue what buddy reading was. I'd seen it, but I didn't know what it entailed. And essentially, it's a book club. It's however many people want to participate, and you read at the same time and you talk about it. I think some people have more stringent rules, like, oh, we'll read this many chapters and then we'll talk. For us, it was like, okay, we're reading and we're talking. She started before me. She naturally finished before me. And I liked the book. But if I hadn't been buddy reading it, I don't think I would have gotten through it as quickly as I did, because I was actually in the middle of another series that I would prefer to finish. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed this. But I'll tell you why in a minute. My one friend, she adored it. And it's not that it's a bad book. I just thought I was given a false impression as to what I was getting into. And that, in conjunction with what I actually got, disappointed me to the point where I was like, it was a good book. It was an enjoyable book. It's a great beach read. You know, it's got that romance. It's lighthearted. It's something that I think plenty of women would enjoy. But I needed a bit more depth within this beach reads-ness. Like, I thought the construction of the novel could have been better in order to give me a better story. That said, I'm still waiting on the third person to weigh in. She started after us. I honestly don't know where she is. She is my personal friend, and so I should probably reach out to her singularly to be like, no pressure. Like, I just want to know what you're thinking, so that she doesn't have to maybe say things in front of a stranger that she's afraid might be taken wrongly. But then again, I was hurt a lot more than I had expected for being kicked out of my book club, and I was accused of being too negative. In reading this book and feeling the way I felt, I was too afraid to actually be completely honest, because I didn't want to be negative. Like, I never try to be negative, but we all have our opinions, and I was just afraid. I'm like, what does negative mean? Is negative bashing a book? Or is negative just saying, this didn't work for me and I want to talk about it, but accepting when other people like it? I did find that I was hesitant to voice my true feelings. And the woman who told me about the book, she just made me feel so uplifted, because I asked a question about a certain part of the book. And she's like, yeah, something. I was like, wow, I'm glad that it wasn't just me. And I was afraid to say anything because I didn't want to come across as negative. And she's like, you know what? You're allowed to not like a book. You're allowed to have differing opinions. And it was so nice for someone to affirm me that way, because I know I'm not always super positive in my reviews, but I try to do it in a fun manner. I try to do it in a, it might not be for me, but it could be for you manner. Although, if you see my Cruel Prince rant, you know that's really not the case. Obviously, tons of people love that book, so read it at your own risk. come up with your own opinions. Obviously, my word is not law, because if it were law, that book never would have gone on the shelves, and it's so successful that obviously I was wrong in some respects, but anywho. And yes, I have been sunburned. Isn't that sweet? I sat outside to get some work done for about 2 hours, and this is the only exposed bit of me. Well, that was exposed. And yeah, I got a nice little sunburn. Actually, my nose is burned too, but you can't really tell from this distance. Anywho, so yes, today called for ice cream, and this book harkens back to another reason that I need a pint of ice cream and a second Coke of the day. But Beach Reads Book Club by Kathryn Freeman. It centers around this woman named Lottie who gets kicked out of her book club and decides to form her own. I've got to tangent here and say that's where my first issue with this book started. Was I was really looking forward to reading something that could affirm me. That could be like, look, we've been where you are, and see what came from it. But Lottie didn't get kicked out of her book club. She left. In a sense, it was a mutual decision, because she could tell, we could tell, that the leader of her group didn't want her in the club anymore. But I thought it was misleading to say that she got kicked out, because she didn't. She offered to leave. She read the room and she was like, I guess I'm just gonna go. She ends up saying a couple things to their leader about how she felt a book club should go, that it should be a safe place, that it should be a space where people can talk about what they think, that they can or can't read the book, but they should be able to participate in whichever ways they want, which resonated deeply with me. So I was totally on board with this book for the first couple chapters. So she leaves, and after her little speech, she's followed by 2 other women from this book club who are kind of like on the same page as her. So they go to the bookstore and they're talking about it, and Lottie's like, why don't I form a book club of my own? Because they'd agreed that what they miss, what they want to read more of, are beach reads. At around this time, so what we meet, I haven't even read the synopsis, so I need to read this to you. Because I don't feel like this book jacket is true to the book. So it says, when Lottie Watt is unceremoniously booted out of her uptight book club for not following the rules, she decides to throw the rulebook out the window and start her own club. One where conversation, gin, and cake take precedent over actually having read the book. The Beach Reads Book Club soon finds a home for its meetings at Books by the Bay. Why can't I plural anything today? Books by the Bay, a charming bookshop and cafe owned by gorgeous, brooding Matthew Steele. And as the book club picks heat up, so too does the attraction between Matt and Lottie. If there's anything Lottie has learned from the romances she's been reading, it's that the greatest loves are the ones hardest earned. So, what I glean, gets kicked out of a book club, starts her own, has a romance. When we meet Matt, we soon start receiving his points of view. So the book is essentially comprised of Lottie's point of view and Matt's point of view. I thought that his were unnecessary. I thought that they detracted from the book, because by focusing on him, and it's not that I didn't like him, I did. It's not that I didn't like his perspective, I did. Granted, there were some things that we learned about him, that we got to know about him, that we never would have gotten had we not been in his head. But I thought he was largely redundant. I do think that most of what we learned from him, he then speaks to Lottie. Since so much of that is already given, I felt like there was a way that Freeman could have worked in the other stuff. But then also because of Matt's perspective, when I first broached my indecision as to how I felt about him and his point of view, my reading partner was like, oh, but I love him and he's so Darcy-like. And so as I was reading, I saw what she meant. He is very much like a Mr. Darcy. However, I thought he would have been stronger if we'd only seen him through Lottie's eyes, because he's brooding. He's dark and mysterious. Like Mr. Darcy, he's misread. I thought it would have been stronger for us to have this impression of him from afar, from what Lottie has seen, only to realize she's got it all wrong, just like Elizabeth Bennet did. But because we're in his head, we see that he's just insecure. And I got tired of his whininess, like his insecurities. I was just eventually super annoyed. I was like, just go cry it out, okay? Go to your room and cry, get over it, and come back. Call me old-fashioned, call me a non-feminist. I love a strong man. I love someone who's gonna swoop in and save the day, who can take care of me. I did not enjoy all of his insecurities. I liked that he had insecurities because it made him flawed, but I wanted him to just be a stronger character, like have a stronger character. But instead, we got a lot about how he was bullied when he was in school and how he has these insecurities because of his failed marriage. And it would have been more satisfying to me to learn that, like, he's not a judgmental fella. He's not a rude fella, but he is an insecure fella. He's had a lot of stuff go on in his past that has informed the way that he behaves now. So I would have preferred to see it rather than to be part of it. Plus, Lottie can do no wrong in his eyes. She physically is perfection. She, personality-wise, is perfection. And it's not until the very end do we see anything remotely wrong with Lottie. Like, she's the saving grace for everybody in this novel. So the women who follow her out of her original book club have their own issues that she helps solve. The other women that she brings into the book club have issues that are resolved because of her. And I was just like, what is there about Lottie that's relatable? I'm so tired of hearing about her great chest region and her great rump region and her effusive, bubbly personality and her gorgeous curly blonde hair and her beautiful, striking gray eyes. Like, I got really tired of it. I wanted to see an imperfection in her. Obviously, the sun rises out of her every orifice as far as Matt's concerned. And then when we get to her, she does have some insecurities, but by and large, she's capable of everything. And I like that. I like a capable character, but I'm tired of hearing a character's praises being sung. And so those two things, plus the fact that by getting Matt's perspective, we lost everything about the book club. We didn't get to see the women because once Matt's perspective was introduced, Lottie's life became about her romance with him. We got very, very little about her attending these book clubs. We got nothing about the books. I mean, nothing. We got some about the books. We would have like a sentence or two that sort of summarize the books, and then maybe one or two sentences or like bits of conversation as to what the women thought. And I guess because I don't know the books well enough. Actually, I don't know them at all. With every new book, we were told, okay, this is the month, this is the month's book. I'm assuming that that book is supposed to inform the succeeding chapters, but it wasn't until the end that I actually saw that coming into play. So even though I knew what the book was, and I kind of got a gist what it was about, I knew nothing about the book. And I was like, why are we talking or mentioning books that aren't playing into the story? this all just goes back to the fact that I thought that Matt's perspective was extraneous. The book would have been much stronger if it had only been Lottie. If we had had Lottie's perspective on their romance, which I didn't mind the romance, I really didn't. And then we'd had Lottie's perspective as to her book club, because those are the two things that are making the Beach Reads book club a book, the romance and the book club. So when we get nothing about the book club and we get nothing about the women in the book club, or not nothing, but very little about the women in the book club, I'm like, why are we even talking about this book like it's about a book club? Because it's not. It's about Lottie starting a book club and being part of a book club, but it's really just about her romance with him. Sure, like he might read one of the books or something, but his life isn't about the book club. His life is about Lottie and about overcoming his own personal demons. And so I was like, I was surprised when I learned that this was not a self-published novel, that it was actually published by HarperCollins. Not that it was badly written. I thought it was well executed. Like, the mechanics were there, although I don't know how I feel about this. I accidentally bought the audiobook thinking I was buying the book, and then I was like, oh no, maybe I should buy the book so I could read it in my own head, like hear it in my own voice. And then I realized that's not going to happen. Don't have time. So I ended up buying both unnecessarily. So, but the audiobook, while it was done well, the book, well, both the book and the audiobook are done by British. So it's a British author and a British narrator. And there were some things in the audiobook that I thought were kind of funny, like pronunciations. And I chalked it up to them just being British, or the narrator being British and me being American. And so we just pronounce things differently. But tell me, does anybody pronounce muscle? So again, the audiobook I thought had some idiosyncrasies. However, the writing, the mechanics of the actual book weren't bad. I just thought the content could have been strengthened. It could have been tightened up a little bit. I don't know how many of you understand what that means, but it's just like getting rid of characters that we don't need, or kind of refocusing on the plot. I thought it would have been really neat if it had kind of been more of an Elizabeth Bennet, Mr. Darcy dynamic, not have carried on so long, although it took forever for these two to get together. So I guess in a way it was Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet like. But now, actually to the plot. As I said, she meets Matt. It takes them a while to get together. He's super uptight. Like, I don't know how wealthy he is. He was in business of some sort. It took up all of his time to the point where his mother was dying and he wouldn't even take the time to come see her, but he would send money. But her dying wish was that her family would stay together. So she dies. He feels exceptionally guilty. So he packs up the entire family, leaves his job, and buys this bookshop, which I'm like, late in the book, he talks about not having a ton of money, but having enough. I'm like, no, I think you've got far more money than you're letting on, because bookshops are dinosaurs, okay? There's no way, unless you are Barnes & Noble, that you are making any kind of income. Plus, you have a super nice car, and you bought this incredible house that you are letting your father and sister stay in for free. And then, at one point, Lottie, she's an electrician, which I think is awesome. I love that it's an unusual job for a woman to be doing, and I love that she's the Electric Blonde. It's such a clever name. But her van dies, and she can't afford to fix it. She can't afford a new one. So what he does is he knows she won't take his money, so he buys a van, and he just passes it off as his work van. She can use it. And I'm like, you just outright bought another vehicle. Like, how do you not have a lot of money? Okay, please explain this to me. Well, yeah, it takes them some time, and we get to meet all the characters in her club, which they are the heart and soul of this book. I'm so disappointed that I didn't get to know them better. She's got this hodgepodge of women in her book club, and things are rolling along, and she and Matt are kind of tiptoeing around each other. I thought some of their romantic encounters were kind of stilted, like came out of nowhere. They didn't make sense. Like they would just be standing there, and the next thing you know, they're making out or whatever. And I'm like, I would have to rewind to figure out how we got where we got, because the last thing I knew, they were standing in a doorway and now they're making out. I'm like, what? And so this is a good thing or a bad thing depending on what kind of a romance reader you are. I like it to an extent. She did not execute it the way that I found appealing, but it was one of those things where it's like they would have a romantic encounter and then they wouldn't talk about it. They wouldn't talk to each other. Nothing was going on, but they can't figure out if the other person likes them. And I'm like, maybe I also need some more relationship experience to quite understand how this is going. But I'm like, if things are going on in a certain space, like, I think it's pretty safe to say he's interested in you, and vice versa. If she's coming on to you, if she's initiating things, I think it's safe to say that she's into you. So some of their feelings didn't feel natural to me. Like their reactions to their feelings and their encounters, they felt forced just to keep that suspense going. Whatever. It's not here nor there. I just thought it took a little long to get where they needed to go. That gets me into coming down, and throughout the book, we have been aware that Lottie had this great love of her life, Henry. He left her for a job in America, and she was incredibly scarred for it. And then Matt had been married, and he and his wife divorced because he was kind of neglectful. Like, he just wasn't present, and then she had an affair. He's scarred by that, but also his removal from everything going on with his family, with his mother dying. It created tension with his family, and even though her last wish was for them to stay together, the dad and the sister not too happy about being taken out of the city and essentially forced into the seaside. That was an element that I don't think we could have quite gotten the gist of if we hadn't been in Matt's head. But I do feel like Freeman somehow could have figured it out, because so much of him was unnecessary. The whole book is working on those relationships. And by the midpoint, he has started to work things out with his sister. He and Lottie are exploring new territory, only for Henry to reappear. I both like and dislike this. I think it was extremely effective. And I even kind of liked Henry because he recognized Matt as a rival. I didn't like it because I didn't understand Lottie's reactions to everything. I guess I understand she is still holding on to Henry and holding on to what they had in almost a figurative sense. Like, yes, she's falling for Matt, but part of her heart belongs to Henry because he was super important. He was someone that she thought she was going to marry, and then he leaves. Then he comes back, and yeah, at first she's like, I'm in a relationship with Matt. She kind of does the right thing. So here is sort of where I guess you could say we start seeing flaws. Ugh, Matt, like, he worshipped the ground she walked on. She's just perfect in every way. Practically perfect in every way. Anybody know where that's from? Yeah, so I guess her reaction to Henry's arrival does finally start to satisfy the need I have to see something imperfect about her. I love the way that he comes in. He knows she's taken, and he's like, I don't really care. Like, as much as you hate him, you love to hate him, because that's exactly what we need from his character. But her reaction to him eventually becomes, okay, well, and then of course Matt is backing off, and I think this was problematic in the writing and execution, because here's a spoiler. We learn that Matt backs off and gives Lottie her space because his wife had cheated on him with her ex-boyfriend. So the man she'd been with when he met her reappears, and they were rekindling their relationship in more ways than one. Let me just say that. This is why he is like, okay, I'm just gonna let Lottie explore this the way she needs to explore it, because I've been there, done that. Don't feel like getting another t-shirt. I wish that we'd gotten more of that, because we get a lot of he's traumatized by whatever happened with his wife. He feels guilty because of the role he played in it. But we get absolutely nothing that indicates that her affair was anything more than just an affair, until this one moment in time when his dad gives a passing mention of Lottie needing to ask Matt about it. And then we get an answer. Like, I was like, okay. When he starts backing off and she's just like, kind of just accepts it. She's like, okay, well, I don't really get it and I don't really like it, but I'm not going to question it really. And I'm just going to let Henry move in, literally and figuratively, that she's just going to let him demand to spend all of their time together and not once be like, well, Matt, you know, I was like, I don't get you, Lottie. I really don't. I understand why it might be hard to say no to Henry because of their history, but at the same time, if she's so committed to Matt, why isn't she fighting for him? Why is she fighting for them? And this is when I start seeing flaws in her that I don't know are necessarily intentional. It's almost like she expects him to do all the work. And then, so as I mentioned, Matt had this van. He bought this van for her because he knew she would not accept any money. And so I think this is an intentional flaw where we see that she has a lot of pride. She will not accept what she views as charity, and I view as like somebody who loves you. They just want to help you. She is on a date with Henry, Matt's sister, and then the guy that she's dating, who is a friend of Lottie's. The sister lets it slip that he doesn't own a van. He bought that van for Lottie, and Lottie gets so angry. Seriously? I mean, for a woman who is all about self-respect and self-awareness, being independent, like, you can't recognize when somebody is just trying to help you because they realize you won't let them help you. So they're going to help you in whatever way they can. You're not going to recognize that as an act of love, be it romantic love or just friendship love. And so her reaction to this, I thought, was out of proportion. Like, it was ridiculous. She saw it as a sign of disrespect because he didn't understand her. He didn't respect her enough to tell her the truth, which I get it. The whole lie thing, I get. Like, be upset by him lying to you. But there are different kinds of lies, all right? There is a lie meant to wound, and then there's a lie that is kind of meant to help. And his was recognizing her need and recognizing that if he didn't lie, she wasn't going to be able to do her job, okay? And then that reminds me, I mean, all the ways that Henry would bait Matt, which this I really don't understand, where Lottie's like, okay, yeah, let me just take both men on a beach date. Essentially, that's what it was a beach date. I don't remember how it happened, but they all end up going to the beach together, and Henry is just baiting Matt and posturing. And I was just like, you're not going to say anything? You're not going to say anything to Henry? You're not going to apologize to Matt? Like, I didn't understand her reactions in this whole love triangle. And that made the love triangle less impactful to me. I didn't care. Because I didn't care about Lottie. Particularly as soon as she had that issue with the van, I stopped caring about her. Because I didn't get her. She was super perfect until she had a meltdown for no reason and shunned the one person, like, of the two men, the one who actually cared about her, who obviously cared about her. And I loved that. I loved that we could see who the better choice was and she couldn't. Like, that's not a problem I have. I really enjoyed that because I love getting riled up, if you can't tell. I thought the book dragged towards the end. It took so long for Lottie and Matt to get together, and honestly, not a lot happened. And maybe that's the thing about Beach Reads, is not a lot is about to happen. And I get the whole trope thing where there's got to be that moment where something terrible happens and rips the lovers apart. I really understand it. But I thought it could have been done better, in a more logical way. I thought maybe we could have characterized Lottie or built Lottie in a different way so that when she does have this reaction, it was more sensical. Once Henry entered the picture, I was ready for the book to be over. I just thought that we carried on far too long because it took too long to get to the middle. It took a really long time then for Henry to re-enter. And then it took an equally long time for Lottie to make a decision and for everything to be hunky-dory. For people who don't want much, this is a good book. And that's exactly what it's supposed to be. But for me, even in my easy romance beach reads, I need a little bit more. I need more development. I need a bit more characterization. I need a bit more plot than what I got from this. And I really want the book to be true to the synopsis. I hate when I pick up a book and it is not about what it says here. I just don't get it. And this was published by HarperCollins? I'm sure I've left lots of stuff out, but this book, if I had to give it a star out of 5, I'd give it like a 3. So I'd give it in the middle. Not a bad book. I didn't think it flowed as easily or as quickly as I would like for a beach reads. I obviously didn't necessarily like the plotting. I didn't like the structure. But on the whole, I did like Lottie. I thought she was enjoyable. Obviously, towards the end, I was over her. In terms of the risque-ness, there's a good bit of build-up. And I actually thought that was stronger than the actual act, because you actually got something. And so this book is a book for people who don't want explicit scenes. However, I thought that the build-up to those things was more emotional. Like, it not got my engine revving, but I felt more of that sexual tension and the desire and the need. And once it was attained, I was like, you couldn't have made it a little bit more sexy, you know? However, Matt's arousal, I could have done with a little less of his arousals. I really could have. So yeah, if that's something that you're worried about, don't. I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend it to a teenager just because I want to keep you pure, even though I know it's a different day and age and teenagers aren't really pure anymore, but whatever. That is the Beach Reads Book Club. Because I have a vastly different perspective on writing now and reading. And so I think that mindset has changed the way I look at books. So some of my favorites aren't necessarily my favorites anymore. They're not as good as I thought. Some of them are. I think I can look at them differently and give a different kind of review for them than I would have in the past. I don't know if you like it. I don't know if you don't like it. I would like to know, do you like me doing older books? Or more obscure books, perhaps? Or do you want me to do new popular books? Because I feel like everybody does new popular books. So give me some feedback as to what kind of books you want me to review. And I will see you next time. Bye. What I probably should have mentioned is it's a happily ever after. Matt and Lottie kiss and make up. In the end, he's on great terms with his family, and her book club is expanding into other genres because his dad is like, you know what? I need something to do. I'm going to start my own book club. So there you go. I should have mentioned that before, and I completely forgot because I get sidetracked. Anyways, this time, for real. Bye.